So in this section, we're going to be talking about cancer, and this is just the second half of health and disease. So we hear a lot about cancer, but what actually is it? Now, what we know is that cells will normally divide by mitosis. So that's normal cell division used for growth and repair. So this is mitosis happening. So what you'll notice here is that we start with this one cell, and it divides and forms two identical cells, which can then divide, and from that they'll also form identical cells. Now, this type of cell division was used for growth and repair. So that's the type of cell division that we normally rely on. But what we don't know is what is cancer. Cancer is uncontrolled cell division and the spread of abnormal cells. A tumour then is a disorganized lump, or sometimes it's called a mass of cells. Now there's two types of tumours that you can have. One is a benign tumour and the other is a malignant tumour. Okay, now the malignant one is the more dangerous one, and it's the one that we consider to be cancerous. If we were to compare them, this is the sort of things we can see. So around this area here is the benign tumour, and then around this area is the malignant one. Now, here's the differences between them. With a benign tumour, you can see that it's enclosed around a capsule. Now, because it's in a capsule, it means it doesn't spread the surrounding tissue. So, if you found a lump on your body somewhere and it turned out to be a benign tumour, that one would be the less severe because there's less chance that it would have spread into surrounding tissue, which can be quite dangerous. As well as that, the cells appear quite normal. So they'll look just like typical animal cells, where they've got a cell membrane, a cytoplasm, and a nucleus. Malignant tumours are a bit different though. They're not enclosed by a capsule. So if you look at these bits, this is a bit which is sort of leaking out, and also this bit here. So it doesn't have a capsule around it. Now this means that they can spread into surrounding tissues and blood. That can be quite bad because they can actually, say for example, a malignant tumour spread to your liver, it can actually take the blood supply from the liver cells and it can actually destroy the liver, and that can happen in basically any organ in your body. The cells also appear abnormal, so they can be different shapes. So instead of being normal animal cells like this, they can be different shapes, they can be different sizes, and they can also be multinucleate, which in this case, that one there has got 2 nuclei. Now this again just shows you a little bit of difference between benign and malignant tumours. So this is a benign tumour. It shows a little group of cells which are growing abnormally, but just locally in one area. Whereas these ones show malignant tumours and they show it invading other tissues. And this one would be particularly dangerous because it has its own blood supply, which means that some of the cells from the tumour can break off, enter the blood, and travel to other parts of the body. And that's when cancer can get really dangerous. So this section then just focuses on the causes of cancer. So there's no single cause, that should be said. There's lots of different ways which cancers can be caused. They can be caused by UV radiation, they can be found or caused by chemicals in cigarette smoke, and they can also be caused by viruses. Some people even have genes which make them more likely to have cancer. So there is loads of different causes. Now, we know that there's many environmental factors that increase the cancer increase the chances of cancer happening. The main ones are UV radiation, chemicals in cigarette smoke, and viruses. Now, it's important here to notice that these are environmental factors. Okay, so genetics is not an example of an environmental factor. These things are things which we might come into contact in our natural environment, and that's why they're considered environmental factors. So the first one is UV radiation, which usually comes from sun or sunbeds. Now, they cause skin cancer. It damages the DNA in the skin cells, and the more exposure to UV radiation, the higher the likelihood of skin cancer developing. So pretty much what happens is the UV light damages the DNA and causes abnormal growth. That will then lead to skin cancer. Now, skin cancer is common among fair-skinned people in hot countries, and this is how you can reduce the risk of developing it. You can use sunblock, cover up in the sun, and don't use sunbeds. So basically, decrease exposure to UV rays, and that decreases the chances of getting skin cancer. The next one then is the chemicals in cigarette smoke. So the main ones that we talked about that are dangerous is the tar. Okay, now the tar is known as a carcinogen. A carcinogen is a chemical that causes cancer. So tar is the main carcinogen in cigarette smoke. It irritates and damages the cells in the lungs, and it can cause them to divide abnormally, and that leads to lung cancer. Now, lung cancer is the single most avoidable cancer in the world. What can you do to dramatically reduce your risk of developing this cancer? So, the main reason or main way is to not smoke cigarettes or stop smoking. So if you are a smoker, it's really important that you stop smoking, and that decreases your chance of getting lung cancer. Now, if you look at this sort of shows you your chances of getting lung cancer. So if you don't smoke, you basically have a normal risk of cancer, which is quite small. But when you combine these things such as asbestos, which you find in the walls of old houses, it was used for insulation and to stop fires. But what they found out is when you cut it, it releases these little fibres and can damage your lungs and cause lung cancer. So by being exposed to asbestos, you increase your risk of getting skin cancer 6 times. If you're a smoker, it increases your risk of getting cancer 11 times. And if you're a smoker who's been exposed to asbestos, you've actually got a 59 times increased chance of getting lung cancer. Viruses can also cause cancer then, and the main one is the human papillomavirus, or HPV. And that is the one which causes cervical cancers. You might have heard of that because most girls around year 9 will get a vaccination against HPV. This little part then, most cervical abnormalities are caused by HPV, which is a virus spread by the skin-to-skin contact during sexual activity. What recent developments may reduce the risk of women developing cervical cancer? Now, in particular, it's the HPV vaccine. Okay, now HPV stands for human papilloma virus. So this vaccination protects young women from that virus. It's offered to people in year 9. Now, this protects against infection and some strains of HPV, which are known to cause cervical cancer. So now that we understand a little bit about what cancer is and how it's caused, the next step is understanding how it's detected. Now, we've all heard that it's important to detect cancer early. If it's detected early, the tumour will be smaller, and therefore it will be less likely to have caused damage to the body. So it's important to detect it very early so we can get it removed to make sure that it doesn't damage your body, and it will be less fatal. It's especially important to detect a malignant tumour before it spreads to other parts of the body. Now, Most of the early detection involves screening programs. Everyone between the ages of 60 to 74 in Northern Ireland is given the opportunity to screen for bowel cancer. There are screening programs for women for both breast and cervical cancer, which involves women of a certain age and or with a particular medical history being invited periodically to a medical centre in order to identify if any cancerous cells are present. Now, a few little questions relating to this then. So firstly, breast cancer is extremely rare in women under 25, but women should check their breasts monthly after this age. Why? Well, if they find any lumps, they may indicate cancerous cell division. And if they are detected early, they are more likely to be treated successfully. Now, what's a cervical smear and why is it important that women should have one done regularly? So, a cervical smear is basically cells are taken from the cervix and they are checked under the microscope for normal cells and cell division. And again, if it's found early, it can be treated very successfully. This basically just shows you how a cervical smear test is carried out. So basically a swab is inserted into the vagina up to the cervix. It's swabbed around, as you can see here. The cells are removed, placed on a microscope, and then they're analysed. And they're basically just checking to make sure that mitosis is taking place properly and that there's no cells which are found which are multinucleate, because those are typical things that you see in cancerous cells. Skin cancer then is the most common form of cancer in Northern Ireland. And what are the signs and symptoms of skin cancer? So to explain this, they actually use the A, B, C, D, E guide. But just for a quick answer here, what you'll be looking for is any changes to moles, be that their size, shape, or colour, or if any new moles appear. This just gives you a little idea of what things to look out for skin cancer. So they say it's the ABCDE test. So A, you're basically checking here to see if it's asymmetrical. So say for example you had a mole, you would probably want it to be quite circular and symmetrical. So if it's asymmetric, that's a good indication that something's going wrong. Now for border, it basically means that you want a nice smooth border. Whereas this one doesn't have it, because you can see that it indents in there and around there. So you want a nice smooth border. The colour is also important. If there's a patch of your skin or a mole which is really dark compared to the rest of it, that might give you an idea that that growth could be cancerous. Diameter is also important. So anything larger than 6 millimeters, as we can see here, is quite dangerous and something to keep an eye on. And evolving basically just means growing. So if you notice a new mole or freckle which starts off quite small but ends up growing to get quite large, that's another pretty important indicator that you need to get it checked out. Now this little section is on cancer treatment. So we've got 3 main treatments: radiotherapy, chemotherapy and surgery. Each one's slightly different, but all are involved in trying to destroy the cancerous cells. So firstly, surgery is basically just removing the cancerous cells using surgery. So usually what they'll try and do is, if they find a tumour, if it's operable and easy to get to, they'll try and remove it just by cutting it out. Radiotherapy is using radiation to destroy the cancer cells, and that's good because they can target them specifically. And chemotherapy is when they try and destroy the cancer cells using drugs. So you either get a drip or you take tablets, and the chemicals basically kill any cancerous cells. Now, the problem with all of these is they have side effects. So we'll have a little chat about those as well. So here's surgery. This is basically where they try to remove the tumour or the entire organ containing the tumour. Now, that's generally only if you can live without that organ or you can get a transplant. So if this can be done before the cancer cells spread, it's a very successful way of treating the disease. Radiotherapy is slightly different. Here you can see this area here, which is a tumour. So what they try and do is basically use this machine here to aim the radiation. So let's say, for example, there's a tumour there. They would try and aim the radiation directly at it. Now, the interesting thing about this machine is this can move around there, and the radiation can be shot at it from different angles. Now, in this treatment, X-rays are used as a radiation to destroy cancer cells. It can be used to shrink the tumour or as a follow-up to surgery to kill any remaining cancer cells in the area. Chemotherapy then is when drugs are used to kill the cancer cells. And again, this can be used as a follow-up to surgery or as a treatment on its own. So say, for example, somebody has a type of blood cancer. There might be no tumour visible, or they might not be able to find one, so instead chemotherapy would be the best method to treat them. Now, as it says here, it works well for some cancers, but can also kill healthy cells and have unpleasant side effects. So chemotherapy basically works by trying to kill rapidly dividing cells. And the problem is, because it kills rapidly dividing cells, it can also kill cells in your body which divide rapidly, such as the ones which produce hair, so your hair follicles. They can also kill cells in your mouth which help you taste things or smell things, and they can also destroy cells in your small and large intestines. So there's quite a lot of side effects and a lot of problems with chemotherapy. But if it's a useful way to kill the cancer, then most people would argue that it's worth going through the problems with chemotherapy to try and kill the cancerous cells. So this then just shows you all the different methods and the advantages and disadvantages for treating different types of cancer. So for surgery, it physically removes the cancer cells from the body. So you cut them out. The advantage is there's few side effects. So because there's no chemicals involved, there shouldn't be any side effects. Might just be a bit painful for a while. But the disadvantage is it's not effective if the cancer has spread or it's in an inaccessible part of the body. So e.g., part of the brain may be inaccessible because you just cause too much damage trying to cut it out. Radiotherapy is when X-rays are used to kill cancer cells. The advantage is that the modern machines can pinpoint X-ray beams very accurately and target very, very small tumours, even if they're deep in the body. But the disadvantage is the radiation can pass through normal tissues and can damage them as well as the cancer cells. Chemotherapy then is using drugs to kill cancer cells. Now, the advantage is these can be used anywhere. So if, for example, we set up here, surgery couldn't use to treat a brain tumour, chemotherapy could be used to treat a brain tumour. But the problem is it's a broad brush approach, causing damage to normal cells with lots of side effects such as nausea and hair loss. Ways of actually reducing the risk of cancer. First one is not smoke. Losing weight can actually help reduce the risk of cancer, as can decreasing alcohol intake. Taking care in the sun, so in other words, decreasing UV exposure. Having a healthy diet with lots of fruit and vegetables, and regular screening or health checks. So that could be cervical or breast screening. Breast. Now this last part then is just a little bit about a new form of treatment called immunotherapy. Now, as the name suggests, immuno is to do with immunity. So what we looked at in immunity was we said that whenever a microbe, which can cause a disease, gets in your body, it has antigens on its surface, like this. When they get in your body, you've got white blood cells, which will produce antibodies, which can basically match on with the antigen. So there's our microbe, there's the antigen, and the antibody matches onto that. In fact, we'll draw those in a different colour. And we said that they had a complementary shape. Now that immobilizes the microbe and means that it's easy for a phagocyte to come along and engulf the microbe and destroy it. So the microbe will die. Now that was a basic principle. But what they've actually discovered is that cancer cells will also have antigens on their surface. So what they can do is they can make antibodies in a lab and inject them into the body. So they inject the antibodies which they've made in the lab into somebody's body who has cancer. The antibodies will attach specifically to the antigens found only on the surface of the cancer cells. Now the reason why these antibodies will only join to these antigens is because they have a complementary shape. So they will attach and join perfectly. They also act as markers so that the phagocytes can then locate and destroy the cancer cells. So in that way, it's actually helping your immune system to fight your cancer. It can provide targeted treatment, which basically means that it will target only the cancer cells, and the hope is that it would reduce the side effects. So for example, you wouldn't get sick like you do with chemotherapy, you wouldn't lose your hair like you did with radiotherapy and also chemotherapy. So overall, immunotherapy is supposed to be the future of cancer treatment, and it should be much, much better for the patient. Now clearly then, cancer treatment isn't quick. Lots of cancer involves long-term treatment and long stays in hospital, and specialist staff are required to treat them. So with these diseases, both communicable, which ones are spread by pathogens, and non-communicable, which can't be spread from person to person, they've got high costs, and these are their costs. So what we want to try and do is reduce the chances of getting these diseases and also reduce the cost to the NHS of treating these for these reasons. Illnesses in families also affect those who act as carers, so they may need time off work. And any individuals with long-term illnesses are not as productive in the workplace. Now, obviously because we're talking about economic costs here, it's all to do with money, money, money. Okay? So, anytime the word economic is mentioned, think about who's that going to cost money to? What are the costs of somebody being in hospital long term? It means they can't work. It means they take up a hospital bed. It means people have to look after them. They take up space in the hospital so other people can't stay. And that all costs money. And that's the end of health and disease on a bit of a grim note. Bye.